and welcome to the Prescribing Prosperity Podcast with your hosts, John and Alex Soutsos. Gentlemen, good to see you. How are you?
Good morning, Bill. I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks. Good. Alex?
Nice to see you, Bill.
Yeah, it's nice to see you as well. I'm excited, guys, about the topic of this conversation. You've touched on it many times before in prior podcasts, and it is the subject of leadership, which, as you know from past conversations, I think is probably one of the single most important conversations that we could possibly have these days, and which unfortunately happens all too infrequently. So with that set up, I'm going to let you, John, and Alex take the wheel.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bill. And thank you very much to our guest today. We're pleased to be joined by, as Bill alluded to, an executive coach and leadership coach, and Charles Soutsos. Charles, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to come on today, Charles. We really appreciate you taking the time to lend us your experience and your expertise in your field. Just so the audience has a bit of a background, Charles is an executive coach. He supports his clients through the exploration of their inner leader and how it applies to their work, relationships, and out in the world, which is a very important foundational skill that many people are lacking and many people need. So through coaching, his clients have experienced a greater sense of clarity, purpose, and fulfillment in all aspects of their lives. So with that, Charles, I'm going to turn it over to you and just ask you, tell us a little bit about how you got here. How did you become an executive coach, and what was your previous life like in the business world before you ended up as an executive coach?
Wow, there's a lot there, but the short story is this: that I was in technology as a consultant for about 27 years, managing different types of teams from creative to engineering. And I got to a point where I was asking myself, okay, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And this was, I'm looking at I was 40 at the time. And in that sort of span, I started bumping into coaches for the first time for myself. And they're all asking me the same kinds of questions. What do I want in my life? What do I want in my future? What was important to me? What did I value? And all of these things. And it got me curious about where I was then and what was important to me and what I wanted to see for my future. And coaching became a thing. The idea of learning and exploring what leadership meant, not just in corporate, in business, but also in life, in relationships and community. And so that began my journey into coaching about 2013 or so. And I've been doing it ever since.
Excellent. It's funny you say that because I actually golfed with somebody at the club on Friday who went through the exact same thing. He was working at PwC in a consulting firm, or he was a CA or a CPA, but ended up becoming a partner there, and kind of the same situation as you. He kind of looked around and said, "We don't have enough of this in our industry, and we don't have enough of this in the business world in general." And so it's interesting that so many people have reached a high level in their career, and like you, they've turned around and said, "You know what? This is a very important skill set that is needed in the business community today." So before we delve a little bit deeper into your leadership coaching career, tell us a little bit about your consulting work. What was it like working in digital design and product development?
That career started in the early 90s. So I don't know how many of you would remember that much of the internet was sent around on CD-ROMs and floppy disks at that time.
I remember it well.
Oh yeah.
You throw it into a computer and you hear this buzzing, whirling sound, and your modem will kick in. Well, that's when my journey into technology started. And so the whole internet 1.0, the evolution of e-commerce and all the precursors to social media and audio apps and everything. That's what my experience was with tech, was seeing all these new emerging technologies evolve. And I joined a number of different organizations, worked with clients around the world, did some very interesting stuff for a long time. But the thing about technology is no one knows what happens in the background. No one knows what happens behind the scenes. So it's very hard to take credit for something that no one's actually, they know they're touching it, but they're not knowing why they're touching it or what was involved in creating it. So,
right.
So after a while, I got a little burnt out. I got a little tired chasing shiny objects and interesting business models and emerging technologies. And that's when I said, well, I was going to wind that career up after 27 years. But in that time, I got to learn about business. I got to learn about in different industries. I got to learn about the gaps in the opportunities for leadership in different sizes of organizations. And I just love working with people. I love watching people expand, to learn new things, to innovate, to be creative, to be engaged, to collaborate. So I didn't want to lose that part of the work. I could give up the technology, but I love working with people. And that was the thing that carried me over into coaching.
Well, I think there's so much satisfaction that comes with dealing with people. Like you generate so much gratitude, and you become better yourself for knowing those people and learning their experiences and what drives and motivates them. As much as the technology helps you, it's a tool.
I'm thinking of these business structures that Charles was working within, and every company has a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is not just the corporate hierarchy itself; it's also a hierarchy within offices. So you could have, like you were mentioning earlier, a large consulting firm. So that consulting firm has a global hierarchy, then they have a regional hierarchy, then they have a local hierarchy. And even within the local hierarchy, because they might occupy 15 floors of an office building, every office itself has a hierarchy. So there's a lot of people being put into leadership positions that aren't necessarily well trained to be leaders, or may not have the intuitive nature to be a leader. And so they're flying by the seat of their pants. And in some cases, it works out. But in many cases, it doesn't. But I can see clearly why there would be a gap and a need for professional coaching, because in as much as everyone is well-intentioned, or at least most people are well-intentioned, I think there's opportunities for everyone to improve.
Yeah.
And I think, just to jump in there, I think that it depending on what industry you're in. So some industries grew at a very rapid pace, technology for one, but even the financial services industry, which we operate in within Canada, there was an organization I used to work for that grew very rapidly, and as a result, people who the people who were in early became the de facto leaders of the organization, because everything kind of built up underneath them, and so they kind of got pushed up and pushed up and pushed up. And in some cases, not in all, but in some cases, there were individuals who ended up in leadership positions who weren't necessarily well suited for those positions for a number of different reasons. It's just a matter of they were there before anybody else, and so by default, they ended up being the de facto leader. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is if you don't have people who are well suited to those leadership positions and know how to have an understanding of both themselves and what motivates and drives other people, those business units end up starting to plateau and fall behind, and it ends up becoming almost like a cancer within the body of the organization. And the organization all of a sudden becomes less and less efficient, because as that becomes bigger in that department, it impacts other departments, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and it can actually hold organizations back. I'll let you jump in and comment on that, Charles.
Well, there's a couple of things I would, definitely want to include there. One is, having worked with a lot of, say, blue chip organizations, these companies have been around for a long time. They've gone through generations of churn. To John's point, many of them have grown international organizations. What I'm seeing there is a churn of the elder statesmen of the organizations, people who have been around a long time, who've seen enough change and innovation and disruption in their fields, who have learned the skills of leadership. They're not there anymore to mentor the next generation of leaders. So there's a knowledge gap. There's a mentorship gap in some of these organizations. So yes, to your point, Alex, some of these companies are elevating people at a rate that might be too fast for some, that they haven't had the ability to, one, learn the skills of leadership, not just from themselves, but through mentorship and examples of good leadership, because those people are not there anymore. Or you have organizations that are on the other side, are startups. They're fast and furious. They're running towards whatever milestones there are. They're running on funding and whatnot. So they have a lot of external or internal pressures to grow. And they're running at a rapid pace, but there is no body of people there to guide them, to mentor them, to create structures for their leadership to grow and prosper. So that's where like the coach comes in, right? And you see a lot of them showing up in the industry to sort of fill in those needs or those gaps within organizations.
Right.
Because that knowledge isn't there. The street smarts, the expertise, the know-how on to lead effectively is just not available inside some of these organizations because, again, there's internal, external pressures. There's gaps in knowledge and experience, and to your point, some of these individuals are being pushed into higher levels of leadership with not enough, times around the block.
Yeah.
They haven't learned enough things about how to lead people. They can do things really well. They're probably very efficient, but there's parts of leadership that are more about, okay, how do I relate to you? How do I relate to people? How do I build and foster strong, trusting relationships so we can get more things done?
And sometimes, having that functional expertise is great, but it's almost it can be a hindrance at times because as you move up in an organization and you become a leader, your job evolves and you are less, depending on the industry, of course, but a lot of times it requires you to be a little bit less hands-on and be better at delegating responsibility and ownership of certain tasks to other individuals. And that's something that my old boss, I've been fortunate. I've worked for some great people in my career, present company included. When I worked with when I worked at CI Investments and on the Asante side of the business, my boss over there was really great at not only fostering a great environment for us as individuals. Like he really made it a team. We always did a lot of social events. We did a lot of team building activities. He was never one to really push people too hard. Obviously, when it needed to be, he would push, but he was never a taskmaster, if you will. But he also was great at, he knew how to do each one of our jobs. He understood it. But at the same time, he was great at, giving you the responsibility and letting you work through the process of saying, okay, what do you think you should be doing here? Why is that your thought process? Which one of the guys under you or women under you do you think is best suited for this type of task? And he was really great at delegating responsibility and then teaching us as the people who ended up becoming, the team leaders underneath him, saying to us, okay, how can you manage the people who are under you better? And I thought that was such a great skill set to have. And it's a soft skill set it's difficult to pinpoint. A lot of people would look at it and they would say, how do I value that individual? But he had tremendous value because he not only understood the organization, but he understood how to manage the people underneath them in a way that allowed them to be empowered and operate at a level so they continue to grow as well.
This is the thing, right? Like I work with emerging leaders, so people going up managing directors up to C-suite executives, and their priorities have to change. It's not an option. They have to realize that their job role, their roles and responsibilities changes as they level up in their seniority. And what you're talking to, I would say often is those middle managers, middle directors to find vice presidents who have to learn how to manage people. They have to know how to get out of the craft of their business, so the things that they know how to do, delegate that really effectively, and spread accountability and build trust with their team to get the stuff done. But in replace of that work that they're not doing anymore, they have to continue to motivate, inspire people, provide clear direction, and think more strategically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's less about doing the work, is more about planning and strategizing the work. And that's a hard thing for some executives to get into, is how do I move out of doing the things that I've been trained to do for so long into now delegating that work that I'm so good at because I can do it faster and better than most people.
Yeah.
And then move into a place, well, okay, you want me to think about the future?
Yeah.
You want me to build relationships outside of the organization? You want me, all those other things come into play, right? Which they're not ready, they're not prepared to do, right? But that's part of their growth as leaders.
And it can be hard because you sit there and sometimes, at least I used to feel this way, is, I'd be telling, the people who are underneath me to do something. And I used to think like, who the hell am I to tell them what to do? Like I feel like I should be doing it with them. Like I should be rolling up my sleeves and getting involved. And, I'm still capable of doing it. Like I should be doing something more. Like I should be more hands-on. And my boss actually had to sit me down at one point and say, it's okay. Like It's not your job anymore to be hands-on unless, there's an urgent, matter that really requires you to jump in. Your job is not to be hands-on anymore. Like you said, Charles, your job is to take a step back and see the bigger picture and manage up as well as down, because you're managing, across different departments now. You're not just working on the individual task. Your time is more valuable when it's allocated to these other tasks as opposed to the hands-on nitty-gritty, because you can delegate that to the people who are underneath you. And it was a hard lesson to learn, but I think it's common across industry. Like, I think of somebody like Steve Jobs. I think Steve Jobs was somebody who, going back to our example of an organization that grew very quickly. When Apple first launched in the 1970s and then grew to what they became in the 1980s, Steve Jobs became the de facto leader of the organization because he was an innovator and he had a lot of the strategic knowledge to see where the organization was going. But at the same time, he had a hard time letting go of the day-to-day stuff. I remember reading that, Steve Jobs would perseverate over minutia, like what kind of font they would use on their computers. Like, what would be the default font? Like, you're the CEO of the company. Who gives a crap what the font is? But that's what he would do. And he had to, he would berate people. He was very hands-on. And, that's ultimately what led to him being removed from the company. And I think he had to evolve as a leader. And he was a very different leader in some respects when he came back to the organization the second time around, and whatever that was, the late 90s, early 2000s. I forget the exact timeline, but in and around that time when he returned to the organization, 8-9 years after he was dismissed.
There's all kinds of leaders. There's guys like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates and Bezos, and all these are very interesting individuals who created a business around a thought or a vision that they had. And they had to learn at one time that the vision was bigger than them, right? And it required people to manifest what it is that they're wanting to see. And then they had to let go, and they had to become strategic leaders, less about doing. And that's a hard lesson for some entrepreneurs to learn. But they learned it, and they built really successful organizations once they got their hands out of the weeds.
It's hard though, because you even look at somebody who would be considered, classically successful, like Howard Schultz. But Howard Schultz has had to step back in as the CEO of Starbucks on several occasions because the person he has handpicked to be his successor has not panned out, or not panned out to the degree that he wants them to. And so it's a difficult process to go through as the innovator and the creator of an organization, to let go of your baby and, hand the reins over to somebody else sometimes.
Charles, what's your process when you take on someone as a client? How do you begin assessing their leadership capabilities, and what happens next?
So normally with a potential new client, we go through a process of what I call a chemistry call, or a series of chemistry calls. And this is really to assess our working relationship, whether or not we have the right chemistry between myself and my client to work through some of the challenges that they want. Typically, I would have them complete some kind of survey form where I get some feedback about the areas that they think are their weakest, opportunities in which they want to expand and to grow. Did they receive a recent promotion, or are they in a new position and they're trying to expand their leadership, etc. So I really get an assessment of where they are at right now, and what are they looking for coaching, and whether or not we are a right fit. After that, we would go through a process of, if we agree to continue working together, getting some feedback from their peers, whether it's their executive sponsors, people at the peer group level, people who report to them directly.
That must be very difficult to get responses from peers. Might be scared to speak up openly and say, yeah, I really don't like the way this person does this, or the way they say that.
Yeah, well, look, one of the key things and one of the important tenets about coaching is confidentiality and anonymity. So I'm only gathering themes or ideas for my client. I'm not quoting people, because people want to feel that they could feel safe to give that feedback directly to me.
How do you get into these positions? Does it typically begin with HR reaching out to you, or a CEO, or do you approach companies and say, we think there's an opportunity for improvement in your company? How does it begin?
Right now, as I've been at this business now for about 11 years, a lot of it comes through referrals. So I would get leaders in HR, I'd get executive leaders and sponsors, I would get people in my network. They just forward me potential clients to work with. They would identify somebody who has high potential and has opportunities for them to grow and expand. and they just need a competent a reputable coach to work with. I do not take cases where there is punitive or reparative work. So people who are on discipline or disciplinary action or performance improvement plans, because I don't believe coaching is a remedy to poor performance. Coaching works best when the client has a high potential for success and they just need to tweak a few things or adjust a few things or learn some new skill sets or mindsets to grow their leadership. It doesn't work very well as a performance improvement thing, like somebody who's deficient in certain skills or have been reported with some bad behavior and things like that. There's just no motivation to do the work.
I see. That's that. Now, if you look at the people in the public eye, could you identify some? We were talking about Steve Jobs earlier and a few others. Can you point out how you could potentially improve the leadership skills of some people in the public eye, whether it's corporate or political or otherwise?
That's a pretty broad question, but what I'll say is, especially those who are in public, their work there is to be the spokesperson for the organization. They're there to build relationships and connections and to inspire not just the internal staff, but their consumers to buy in whatever their organization stands for, their products, their services, etc. The hardest thing to be in that position is to balance your life because so much is public facing. You have investors to deal with, you have regular, depending on the industry, you might have to deal with policymakers and regulatory bodies and associations and etc. So a lot of their energy goes out externally. Some of my work with them is to how do you manage or balance the internal parts of you? How do you find yourself balanced and sort of be able to manage all this? Because it can exhaust some people, it could lead to burnout. So I'm very mindful of those things. But they still have an organization to lead. They still have to delegate to people. They still have to direct people. They still have to strategize and plan. And that also takes energy. So there's a lot of pressure to be public facing in a large org. But if I was coaching somebody in that position, I'm looking at it holistically. How are you prioritizing your work? What are you delegating? And how are you taking care of yourself through all of that stress?
And so what would you, when you're looking at the traits of a successful leader, what would you observe as the, top 3, let's say, for example, traits of a successful leader in the business world?
Top 3 traits. First, they got, if depending on where they are and standing in an organization, they have to be able to build relationships. They have to build strong, trusting, solid relationships. They have to build rapport with them. And depending on the closeness of that person to them, the stronger the relationship needs to be, right? Leadership is less about command and control now, right? It's more about motivation, inspiring, empathizing, and effectively delegating responsibility, less about control, right? So they have to be able to build strong relationships, whether it's external, sideways in peer groups or down below them. They have to be able to build trust. People follow people who they trust, first and foremost, who they feel inspired by. And that's relational. So they have to be able to relate to each other. I think the other thing is that effective leaders can vision, they can strategize, they can imagine a future or a possibility and communicate it with a sense of passion or purpose, meaning, and inspire and enroll people behind it. If people are not connected to your vision or strategy, they're not going to follow you, right? So the ability to communicate your strategy and vision in a way that enrolls people, right? And I think if most effective leaders know who they are, they know what their strengths and weaknesses are. They know where they shine brightest. And then they bring in people who are better than themselves, surrounding them with people who are more knowledgeable, more expertise, more whatever, because that's where all the greater ideas come into play. If a leader comes across as thinking they know it all, and then they surround themselves with yes people, they can only go as far as the leader themselves can go.
Is that still occurring these days?
Oh man, you don't have to go far to see it happening, right? Look south of the border, Mr. Trump himself. He's surrounding himself by yes people. He's not a growth mindset leader. He's a control leader. right? Yes, he can talk really good stuff, but he's controlling his environment in which he ultimately looks the best. And in order to do that, you have to be able to hire people who say yes to you and won't push back and won't tell you different. So that's a prime example of an ineffective leader. Control command. That's an old style of leading. It doesn't work anymore, especially in corporate organizations.
Are you suggesting that that might be a function of age, and that this is why it's important to look more to the younger people to take the reins in our organizations like government?
Absolutely. I think generationally, I think age has a factor in that. I think a lot of things has a factor in that. I don't think I think he does struggle with certain styles of leadership. He's very much a command control type leader. That doesn't work that definitely won't work in many, say, organizations, for profit or not for profit. It doesn't work.
So we talked about, the number one trait that you think is building relationships and understanding, how to build relationships in and around your organization, and then also being able to have strategy and be able to look towards the future and plan successfully for the organization's future. How do you measure the success of an organization or the success of a leader? Is it by organizational output, or are you tracking soft metrics as well? Things like, morale, turnover rate, customer satisfaction. How do you measure whether or not a leader is successful in their role?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not, as an executive coach, I'm not looking at performance in regards to revenue, right? Or growth of an organization. That's not my realm. There's experts who do that level of a consulting. That's not my space. I'm looking at the individual and how they are being able to discern what their workload is, their ability to manage that workload, their ability to delegate that workload off to their teams, their ability to lead and motivate and enroll people to do the work, right? So if I'm seeing a reduction in turnover or attrition in an organization, if I'm seeing higher engagement with their employees, if I'm seeing higher levels of productivity and efficiency within my leader, then there you go. It's working. If I could see my leader, enrolling stakeholders into their vision and their strategy, now we're working. If I could see my leader getting better sleep, better rest, exercising, taking care of their diet, we're working. If I see their personal lives improving, their relationship with their spouses or children improving, we're working. We're getting those things done, right? So it's not just about business performance for me. It's how is this individual becoming a better leader in all aspects of their life.
So how do you know when your work is complete with the individual, or maybe it doesn't? You can explain that. Is it you come in and you do an intensive for 6 weeks, 8 weeks with that individual, and then you kind of do like a maintenance meeting, or how does it work?
Yeah, well, look at the first. Normally my engagements begin like a 6-month engagement, and in that time, I'm already unpacking some maybe limiting beliefs, some frustrations, opening up some possibilities of them changing their perspective of their leadership style, getting to embrace things that are deeply important to them about their leadership. So that first period of time is really just breaking the ice and getting to know who this human being is. And yet there probably are some short-term wins we can steer towards. But that's really a beginning. Many of my clients will go on for another 6 or maybe 12 months, and we get into even deeper work about how they communicate, or opportunities for them to foster or build new relationships, whether it's within the organization or externally. Or maybe there's some more life structures that they want to build on. And it can go on from there.
Charles, I want you to elaborate a little more on what you said earlier about diet, exercise. I personally have gone through some transformational process in my own health that involved diet and exercise, and I see a big difference in mental clarity and the ability to take on stress. So how much do you emphasize diet and exercise when you're speaking to leaders in your consultation?
It's almost one of the first things I ask my client, right? Is, okay, how are you taking care of yourself? When do you turn your devices off? At night? When do you turn them on in the morning? Do you get a full night's sleep? How do you eat? Do you drink alcohol? Do you work with a therapist? Do you do things like meditation, prayer, right? Do you take time off? What do you do for recreation, right? Because if we don't release our stress, we just bottle it up and it becomes toxic, right? And I have my own lived experience. I was also, as an emerging leader, working 70, 80-hour weeks in mortgages and families, and I burned out many times. I developed Crohn's as a disease, and I realized it was a lot about how I was working and my relationship with work, right? So I coach my clients to take care of themselves. Sleep is probably the most important thing we can do for our bodies, next to drinking water and eating properly. But there's other ways of relieving stress or taking care of stress through meditation, journaling, time with family and friends, etc. And when we can restore ourselves, we are better equipped to dealing with the stress at work.
Let's elaborate a little bit on alcohol. Alcohol has been part of business organizations, at least it was in decades past. I think it still is today when you're taking people out for entertaining potential clients. But even internally within organizations, they have functions in order to, build relationships internally. And then the alcohol starts flowing, and then obviously there are some percentage of the population within those organizations that become reliant on the stimulant to continue to function. How does that impact their leadership ability and their ability just to cope with stress?
Yeah, look, it's not to make alcohol wrong. It's more about, okay, what do you use alcohol for? Is it a means of socializing and connecting, lubricating a conversation, as I would call it? Or is it the way you handle stress? Right? So I'm looking at the relationship with the alcohol versus the alcohol itself, right? If it's a coping strategy for stress, then there's a potential problem in there, right? And that might require, depending on, if the client's open to it or not, that might require some investigation on what they want that relationship to look like going forward. But if it's a social drinker I'm talking about, I'm less worried about that.
So in your experience, are you coming across situations where people have some substance abuse issues that need to be dealt with before you can take them to the next step?
Fortunately not. I have not had people with like dire sort of habits with alcohol or drugs. Nothing that they haven't already been taken care of, was it through therapy or counseling or rehab work. Most of my clients are pretty clean, fairly sober. They are fairly healthy. I'm seeing more executives taking more care about themselves. The biggest issue right now, what I'm finding, is their attachment to technology. Right? They cannot disconnect from their phone. They're responding emails too late at night or too early in the morning. Technology I think is more problematic in my experience with the executives I work with than, say, alcohol and drugs. Even though those are there, but it's the technology, I think, is the bigger problem.
Isn't technology the new drug?
Yeah, it's a dopamine hit. It's we're hooked on those drugs, man. Like what those stimulants do in our brains, right? And the moment we turn them off, our anxiety grows up, our fear of missing out goes up, and like that stuff is like this. I know I've felt that time and time again with my use of technology. But you're dealing with social feeds, news feeds, emails, text messages, WhatsApp, and all this other stuff. It's the technology is the new thing.
Right. And I think it also makes things difficult because you constantly feel that pull to respond to everything. And there are times where you don't need to respond instantaneously, but you feel obligated to because everyone knows that the means exist for you to do so. And so the expectations become a little bit unhealthy at times, I find. And it actually ties in well to my next question, which is going to be, how has technology changed how employees or subordinates receive and respond to different leadership methodologies?
Look at it this way. Technology is a very powerful tool, and we all have to use technology one way or the other. The consequence, however, is that we're not paying attention, right? We're easily distracted, right? We can't stay still enough to work through problems effectively. We're rushing through things. We're making mistakes. We're missing on details. We are not paying attention to relationships because we're operating between screens. People are less engaged personally. The whole thing about remote working has caused barriers to building strong relationships, networking, getting mentorship. Those water cooler talks are probably something of past now because of the way our environment's set up. So it's having an impact across the board for many people. I think to your point there, Alex, is the impulse to have to respond to everything.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's your Facebook, your LinkedIn, your email, your text messages, like it's overwhelming, and people have developed an anxiety not responding, right? Because now you're thinking, well, if the other person doesn't respond to me, what does it mean?
Oh, you know what it does to me, Charles, is I get anxiety from the standpoint of, there's just too many things to deal with all at once, because you just see the notifications build up. You're like, oh my God, I just got 5,000 things I got to respond to. And it's nice to just, put it down and just walk away from it and be like, you know what, I don't need this right now. I need just a break.
Yeah.
The good thing about people my age, or at least me, is I don't pay attention to any notification. This thing's dinging all the time. I have no idea why it's dinging. It's just I know it's dinging. Yeah. And so I don't feel in a sense of urgency to respond to anything. I respond to things when I'm ready to respond to them.
Here's two things I've learned myself, and I teach executives to do these two things. One, you turn your notifications off.
How do you do that? Can you show me how to do that?
Alex, you just turn your notifications off.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if you got an email box with anything more than 10 unopened items in it, you delete them. You're not going to reply to them. Let's face it. There's stuff sitting in your inbox. You're never going to open it. You're never going to reply to it. So just select it all and delete them. Because and that's with your text messages and your voicemail messages and whatnot. That number with that little red dot there that you see on your device is anxiety producing stuff, man.
I want to get back into the issue of remote working.
Yeah.
And obviously it's been transformational for people in white collar businesses. So a couple of questions with us. A, is remote working dehumanizing to the process of work? And how are we going to get back and away from that? Or is this permanent now?
Well, I hope it's not permanent. And I think there's companies and industries that are moving back into in-person. I know other parts of the world where I've done coaching in Europe and Asia, most of them have gone back in person. The thing about North America, we're kind of beholden to remote work. Because people got to commute, people got to look after kids and all these other things. And now you're looking in the Toronto area where I live, people are moving away from area like centers of work, right? So commuting is getting harder. I think remote workers lose out big time on their social skills. They lose out on networking opportunities. They lose out on mentorship opportunities. They lose out on those water cooler conversations. They lose out on a lot of things by working remotely. I think the only way to turn it around is organizations mandate that they turn it around, that they come back to the office. That's the only way I can see it changing, because the employees are not going to put their hands up. So, yeah, I'm going to go back to the office.
No, it becomes a very comfortable environment and an easy environment to escape from, because you have a little bit less scrutiny. But I think the remote work is a topic that we should continue with, because I think there's a lot to it. But we'll do it on the other side of the break here. I'll let Bill jump in here so we can put a wrap on this episode, and then we'll pick up the conversation in episode 2.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. I've got many, many questions from sitting here and listening to you, Charles. I want to thank you for being here. And I would encourage those of you who listen to this conversation, remember there's a part 2, and we're going to delve into a bunch more issues, including this whole controversial issue of remote versus in-person work. Before we go away, though, Alex, John, what's the best way for anybody who's listening to this who are not clients of yours, who are not familiar with you at this point, for them to get a hold of you?
Best way is to go to our website, medwealth.ca. That's med-wealth.ca.
That is great. And I would encourage you, those of you who are listening who are not familiar with John and Alex, if you even have an impulse, do reach out to them and get in touch with them, because I think you will find it really worthwhile. The other thing you can do right now is hit the follow button, because by hitting follow, you become a subscriber and you're notified when the next episode drops. And the next episode is part 2 of this conversation with Charles Sue Wing. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And we'll catch you in part 2.